What's an experience you've deemed supernatural and cannot find a rational explanation for? Story 1. When I was a kid, I was putting on gel in front of the mirror. My bedroom door was locked. When I finished, I tried placing the lid back on the jar with my sticky gel hands. I dropped it and hit my foot, and it slid under the bed. I was like fudge and dried my hands with the little towel. Then, as I was bending over to pick the lid from under the bed, it slid back out on its own. I didn't panic or anything, but I did look under the bed, and there was absolutely nothing where it could bounced off of. Also, by the time I reached for it, it wouldn't make sense either way. It's not a scary or interesting story with poltergeist activity and humanoid characters, but I always think about it. What was it? What pushed the lid back out? You'll never have an answer. Story 2. During the Bush War in Zimbabwe in the 70s, most civilian road travel was in convoys escorted by armed police or army. There was an armed vehicle in the front of the convoy, one at the back, and one roving along the line of cars. My father was a cop driving the roving vehicle in a convoy going from Bulawayo to the South African border at Beitbridge. At some point, they were doing a vehicle count and noticed there was one vehicle missing. They rechecked against the list of registrations, and sure enough, one car wasn't there. They radioed back to Gwanda, and a vehicle was dispatched to see if somehow one had broken down and nobody had noticed. Nothing. Shortly afterwards, they received a message that the vehicle had been found. It had pulled up to the police station in Messina, which was about half an hour beyond the border in South Africa. The bewildered driver could not explain how he went from being in the middle of a line of cars to being several hundred miles away on the other side of a border. The family's passports were checked, and there were no immigration stamps or indication they had been through the border posts. He swore this was true. I choose to believe him because, man, what a weird story. Story 3. I heard a little girl laughing in the back room of my house. There's no one living around me other than my mother on the hill behind me, and it's in the country, so people don't just walk by my house, and that room is cut off from the rest of my house because it's currently filled with lumber for the barn rebuild and other stuff. So there's no one in there. And my daughter doesn't live with me, so it wasn't her being in there when she shouldn't be. No explanation. Story 4. Used to work hospice care. A woman who was dying of a brain tumor had 2 Siamese cats she adored. She had pictures on her wall and, while lucid, would tell me about them often. The night she passed, I called hospice and waited in the living room. It was summer, and the front screen door was open. I look over and see 2 identical Siamese cats sitting there. Thinking I'd lost my mind, I took a picture of them. They were real. Her cats had passed 8 years before. I'm a rational and logical person and think there's a rational and logical explanation for most ghostly phenomenon. I cannot explain those. Cats. Story 5. So many years ago, I was dating a girl. Now that's supernatural in and of itself, but there's more. I cared for her deeply. First relationships will do that to you. But she was in a bad way. Too much partying, too many substances, hanging with what is absolutely the wrong crowd, and some very illegal shoot after she broke up with me that I'm really not comfortable discussing. A couple of years go by. I think of her on occasion and hope she's doing better, but not terribly often. Then one night, I have the dream. In it, she's standing by my bed and reassuring me that everything is okay. She's better now, and there's no need to worry about her anymore. Odd dream, but I don't think much of it until 2 days later when I catch sight of a newspaper with a story about having found a who had gone missing. She OD'd on heroin the night I had the dream. She wasn't a saint, but she'd also come up a bad way, and according to what mutual friends had relayed to me, I'd been one of the few people who really cared about her. I don't really have an explanation for what happened, but I like to think that she wanted to make sure I knew she was going to be all right. It's part of what leaves me firmly believing in some sort of afterlife. Answer: that's both sweet and sad. I have an ex who will always hold a place in my heart, but he just wasn't functioning anymore, and I had to end it because he was sucking the life out of me. Half-treated depression, untreated anxiety and ADHD, social phobia. A sweet, sweet man, but a wreck. I think of him now and again and wonder how he is. The breakup was hard on us both, and I worry he doesn't have the capability to bounce back. But that can't be my problem, and whatever he chooses is on him. I hope somehow he'll find some better help instead of meds that don't work, but I worry someday I'll hear he eliminate himself. Story 6. When a strange force pulled me 12 blocks through my small town one night, I just sort of felt like walking, and as I went on, the impulse got stronger until I could tell exactly where I was going. The location had zero significant relevance to me or my life, and when I got to one end of the field, there was a small black figure sitting in the spot I felt I was supposed to go. I realized how weird the situation was and sprinted all the way home. It was super strange, and 6 years later, I've never had anything at all similar happen. It started by meditating in a dark space on my porch. Answer: reminds me of this book series related to time travel where a bunch of famous people in history were kidnapped by travelers. Whenever they would travel back in time, there would be these translucent figures that are placeholders for things missing in time, which were called tracers that only time travelers could see. The people the tracers belonged to would always be attracted towards them, attempting to become one with them. Maybe you were someone pulled out of time, and that was where you actually belong. Story 7. I have an old TV my parents bought way back in 1986 when they were living in Germany. When I was little, that TV was retired from the main family TV to the basement TV, and my bedroom was in the basement. I very clearly remember waking up in the middle of the night, frequently and randomly for years, and laying down on the couch in front of that TV. It would turn itself on and play music for me so I could fall asleep on the couch. As I've grown older, moved from place to place with it, it's done other things. Turning on to full screeching static when my toaster caught fire while I was in another room, or dramatically turning off and not coming back on when I've been awake for too long. Weird shoot, really. I don't know what's up with it or inside it, but there's something in there, and it's my oldest and most loyal friend. Edit. First, thank you. Kind stranger for the gold. Second, it is a Hitachi brand TV. They bought it on a military base post exchange. Story 8. My randomly assigned college roommate and I felt deeply connected the moment we met for the first time. We were inseparable right away, as if we had never really been strangers. Months later, we randomly find out that our mothers were pregnant at the exact same time in the same city in a country that neither of us are originally from. They were in that country for two completely separate and oddly specific reasons, so we're not talking your ordinary beach vacay. She is from the US and I'm from a European country. Up until that point, there had been no overlap in our lives except for the 9 months our pregnant mothers unknowingly lived on the same street in a foreign country. A couple of weeks prior to giving birth, they both moved back to their respective countries. It's been 10 years and she is still one of my best friends. And no, we don't have the same dad, so please don't suggest that. Haha. Story 9. I had just moved into my first apartment. It was a very small studio in a not-so-great neighborhood. I was 21. I started noticing things going missing after a couple of weeks. A nice pair of underwear, a charm bracelet. Things I thought maybe I left somewhere, or lost, or misplaced, until I noticed a picture of me and my friend I had on my fridge was gone. I was perplexed. I turned my apartment upside down, no picture. Over the course of the year, little things would just disappear. I even went to the office and asked how many employees had access to my apartment. The office manager showed me the safe with the keys and showed me the log of who takes what key when. None of the dates added up to missing items. I was perplexed. I was about 2 weeks from moving out because my lease was up and I was moving in with my boyfriend. A storm came in and damaged the apartment building, roof and HVAC. Maintenance let me know they'd be coming in to replace ductwork and replenish insulation. The guys come in, go in my bedroom closet, and lo and behold, there's a panel leading to this weird attic space that spans the entire half of the apartment, 4 homes. I had no idea it was there, and the maintenance guys assure me that it's only accessible from my apartment. I decided to poke my head up and look about while they were up there. In the back corner above my bedroom was what I can only describe as a shrine of my stuff. My underwear, picture, jewelry, all of my missing items, all together, placed in a triangle. I got so freaked out I just left it all there. I moved into my boyfriend's house that night. I had him and his friends move my things for me so I didn't have to go back. I told the apartment manager, but she didn't seem to care at all. I get physically ill when I talk about it. Still, because I know someone was watching me that whole time and I had no clue. Answer: I bet your apartment manager lied about the panel only being accessible from your apartment. I've lived in multiple apartments before with similar setups. In one of the bedrooms, there was an access panel leading to the attic space. It usually leads to an open area that does access other apartments and is padlocked. I couldn't access it if I wanted to. Only the apartment maintenance has access. However, one of the apartments I lived in, my sister lived in another unit as well. Her attic access was unlocked. She looked in it, and if she desired, she could access her neighbor's apartments. And they hers if theirs were unlocked. She put something heavy in front to block it. Story 10. I had a cat named Rocky. He liked going out and was always chased by the colony dogs, but was never caught. Then one day, he fell really sick and died a few days after that. Even the vet couldn't treat him. Anyway, so I was holding him in my arms when he passed away. In my house. Not give seconds after his passing, every single street dog in the colony came close to my house and started howling. Later, I found out that all the pet dogs that Rocky had interacted with any time in his life had also howled. I seem to think that it was maybe a howl of respect that they could never catch him. IDK. All I know is that it was very bizarre. Rip Rocky. I will always love you. Story 11. In the middle of the 90s, we visited some family at their farm in another country. And the place was super rural, like they had some pipe coming out of the side of some mountain for fresh water and one of these dumpster toilets that are actually just a hole in the ground, and if it's full, they throw earth on it and dig a new one. So, it was in the middle of summer and super friggin' hot, even at night. I had awoken around 3 a.m. because I needed to take a leak and went outside to go to that little shithole in the ground. There was nearly no electric light outside, so no light pollution, just a brilliant star-lit sky all over and around me. So I looked up and let it sink in and just enjoyed the moment when suddenly a thick, fat, gleaming light beam raced from left to right over the sky, stopped freaking in the middle, hung there for about 5 once, and then raced off to the right. The whole thing lasted for less than 2s, but it left me dumbfounded. I was never a big UFO believer, but damn, what the fudge was that? Answer: oh my gosh, I'd almost forgotten about this incident, but I saw something kind of similar. When I was in high school, I dated a guy who lived a couple streets away from me, and we'd usually call each other to catch up in the evenings. One summer night, I had gone into the backyard to sit on the porch swing while we were talking, and I was kind of just spacing out, staring at the stars and airplanes overhead. We lived by an airport, so there were plenty, when I noticed what I thought was a really bright, large satellite slowly moving across the sky as satellites do. I tried to point it out to my BF, but he couldn't find it, and as I was watching and describing it, it made an abrupt 90-degree turn, sped up a little bit, and then just vanished. It was super weird. Story 12. I grew up in my grandparents' house, which was an extremely old house that used to operate as a store. It was later converted to a house, and then my grandparents bought it. One day, my grandma and I are sitting in the kitchen. I'm reading a book, and she was perusing a magazine, when we hear a sound loud and clear, the sound of cowboy boots walking around in the room above us. Very distinct footfalls, and they couldn't be confused with another sound if you know what cowboy boots on hardwood floors sound like. My grandma and I look up at one another, and I remember whispering to her, I thought we were the only ones home. We were the only ones home at the time, and I was never comfortable in that house by myself again, especially since my bedroom was upstairs next to the empty one with the footsteps. Story 13. For over 2 years after his passing, my partner continued to receive texts from her dead son. The texts arrived on average at least once a week, and usually at moments she felt at her lowest. The texts were mostly the same, love you, see you soon. This phenomena occurred with 3 different phones my partner had over this time. Her son's phone was kept in a drawer at his sister's. It was chipless and no longer working. Story 14. Okay, this is a story I've never been able to explain, but this is the perfect thread to share it. There was a big creek behind my neighbor friend's house. It was basically a natural stream that had been turned into a glorified sewer drain. It was all surrounded by houses. The creek ran down through this hilly, partially wooded field up to this very small underpass. On one side was a very large drain for rainwater from the adjacent street. When dry, the mouth of the drain was a wide, flat concrete slab. My friends and I used to play here all the time. It was pretty picturesque, all things considered, with a small natural waterfall that spilled into a deep pool that continued through the underpass. One time, I went down there with my friend, and we saw something at the drain's mouth on the concrete. It was like this weird thing. It was dead, roughly the shape of maybe a baby raccoon, but completely hairless, a little bloated, probably from being dead, and this weird, fleshy blue color. It was covered in a clear, watery slime, and there was this puddle pooling around it, but the drain and area around it was bone dry. It had 6 limbs that ended in small little hoof-like appendages. A scrawny, thin tail, a mouth that was like this very rounded muzzle with small slits for nostrils, and what appeared to be 4 closed eyes and small, rounded ears. Think like a hamster's. There wasn't a mark on it, no scratches or anything, but it was dead. My friend and I freaked out like, what TF is this? Well, my dad had a really nice camera, and I said we should go get it and take a picture. In retrospect, one of us should have stayed there, but we were like 9 and 10. So we go back to my house and start telling my parents about this weird thing by the creek, and we got to take a picture of it, and my dad was instantly interested because I wasn't the kind to exaggerate this much. So he takes the camera and follows us to the creek. And the thing is gone. The stain of the puddle is still there. There's no signs. The puddle was disturbed, like maybe it rolled into the creek or an animal came by to snack on it. But this thing is just gone. My friend and I are in shock and swear it was just right here. As we're talking, This old guy who lived in one of the houses nearest this part of the creek and had a view of it came up to us and said he saw us looking at something, then go away. And while we were gone, this guy in a nice black suit came out to the spot we were looking at, picked something up, and walked away. Well, the suit guy made him suspicious enough to come down and see what was going on. I don't remember what really happened after that, just that my friend and I were insistent on what we'd seen but got dismissed by the adults. I've always tried to dismiss this as I saw some weird roadkill of a baby raccoon or something that got washed through the drain. But then why was it completely hairless and so blue? It wasn't cold outside. This was the dead of Midwestern summer. And why did a guy in a black suit supposedly take it away? Story 15. When I was in middle school, I lived on a hill that had a graveyard on it. I had a friend who pulled all-nighters with me. In summer, it's light here pretty much all night, so it was never creepy. As we were heading down the hill, I don't know why, but I glanced back and saw a little girl in a white dress. This was around 2 or 3 a.m. I stopped, and she walked into the woods, which the graveyard was like 100 yards away from. I asked my friend if he saw her, and he did. We both thought it was weird, so we went up to see where she went, but saw no sign of her. 3 years later, I have a class in high school with a teacher who loved local ghost stories, so every Friday he tells us 1 or 2 new ones. Then he talks about the girl at the Hill Cemetery, and it snaps back to me. I got chills from the thought. My friends and I decide to visit the graveyard at night because we were dumb and young, generally creepy, so one tried to spook us by hiding. 5 minutes later, he walks up looking pale, asking to leave. Points to the woods, saying a little girl just tried talking to him, and I felt like we were being watched from the trees. Answer: my mom was walking to work one morning, and her commute almost entirely involved going through 2 massive adjacent cemeteries. By massive, I mean that the road she goes down is flanked on either side by acres of the same cemetery, and the 2 adjacent ones are separated by the throughway. Anyway, one morning, the ground on the one cemetery had a lot of crows, by which I mean she told me that the ground was black as far as she could see with nothing but crows. They were even on the sidewalk, and just casually hopped out of her way as she went by. The strange thing is, and she didn't notice this until afterwards, was that they weren't making any noise. She says that in the distance, she saw what looked like a 5-year-old girl deep in the cemetery. It was February, so she was more concerned that somebody left their kid in a crow-infested cemetery without winter clothing, completely unsupervised. Why would somebody do that to their kid? She might run into a ghost or something. Story 16. My friend and I were at her cabin in her bedroom with the door closed, and we heard what sounded like the stove being pushed across the floor. We know that's what it was because we tested it the next day. We asked, and her dad and brother wouldn't lie, and they both said they were sleeping. It was about 2-3 a.m. when this happened. Story 17. Once when I was a little kid, hadn't started school yet, my siblings and I were playing hide and seek. I hid in one of the bedrooms between a bunk bed and the wall. It was a corner hiding spot, a window on the wall the bed wasn't on. I just sat in the corner waiting to be found, back to the wall, bed to my left, and wall with a window to my right. I didn't have anything covering me, so if you looked in the corner, you'd see me, right? Apparently not. I remember that multiple people, siblings and parents, had looked into the corner but never said they found me, so I just kept sitting there. Eventually, my parents called the police. They could not find me. I came out after a while confused as to why no one had found me and wondering why the police were here. To this day, my family, me included, joke that I can turn invisible. Answer: I did this once somehow. I had come upstairs from my sister's room. I was using her computer, and her room is directly below the living room. I get upstairs, walk past both my sister and my mother who are watching TV, and go to my room. I come back 5 minutes later and my mother gives me an odd look. How did you get there? What do you mean? Weren't you downstairs? Yeah, but I came up around 5 minutes ago. I didn't see you. I literally walked right in front of you and her. My sister. It either didn't register or I somehow became invisible for a minute. Story 18. Great question. I don't really believe in ghosts, but a whole bunch of weird, unexplained stuff went down in one house I lived in growing up. Nothing like it happened before or since that place. One time, my sister and I were sitting in the living room, and an antique clock from the 1800s sitting on the mantel chimed a few times for one of the hours. That clock hadn't been wound or had the hands move at all in several decades, nor had it been moved or settled in years. There's no way a gear just happened to turn over after all that time. We turned white looking at each other. Another time, my whole family was sitting in the family room watching TV, and there were 3 loud, distinct knocks on an interior door in the hallway. My mom said, "I guess that's Ralph visiting us with a straight face." Ralph was the former owner who died within a few weeks of moving out of the place. No idea what makes 3 loud knocks on a door. Not a fun experience. I used to hear what sounded exactly like footsteps moving around the house at night. This was not regular creaking or settling. It was clearly moving down hallways. Usually I would get a little bit scared. One night I was actually counting loud steps moving towards my room, and it clearly sounded like someone stopped in the hallway outside my room. This time I wasn't scared. I was annoyed. I got up with the intention of complaining to a family member that it was really annoying that they were walking around the house in the dark at night, and I opened the door and there was no one there. Freaked me out. I'm as skeptical about supernatural stuff as anyone, but these things happened with no reasonable explanation. I'm glad nothing like this has ever happened anywhere else I've loved since then.